Hi everybody and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History with me, Amanda Hallay, and a very short episode of my capsule review and costume analysis of West Side Story, the 2021 remake that I saw last night, directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, before I begin, I don't do comments here, but I will leave my contact details below. And if you want to chat about this movie, join the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group. I'll leave a link to that as well. Right, so I know some people, personally, who have told me that they are refusing to see the remake of West Side Story because they love the 1961 original so much, and they're actually quite angry that Steven Spielberg took it upon himself to remake it this year. I never understand this kind of thinking because Broadway musicals are revived constantly. Imagine if we were only allowed the 1964 version of Hello Dolly and we could never see Hello Dolly again. Broadway musicals are being revived constantly on Broadway, on the West End, in touring companies and amateur dramatics. So why is there so much anger about a movie being remade of a movie musical, or any movie for that matter, especially stage things, musicals? I don't get it. So with that in mind, I went in to the new West Side Story very excited because although I love the original 1961 version, I don't have an issue with a musical being revived, as long as it is revived properly. So my first comment is this. For any of you out there who are worried that Steven Spielberg has somehow ruined a beloved musical, believe me, he has not. The new movie plays such respectful homage to both the original 1961 movie and the original Broadway show that I think you'll be very reassured to know that there's no revision in the narrative, there's no happy ending tacked on the end, which turned out to be quite upsetting and confusing for Annabelle, my 12-year-old stepdaughter, who was assuming all along that there would be a happy ending. Maybe I should have told her that there wasn't. What can I say about West Side Story 2021? It is fantastic. It is one of the most exciting experiences that I've had at the movies in many years. It is so full of energy and electricity, and it is different in many ways to the 1961 version, and mostly in this way. I think in the 1961 version, the cinematography and the settings were very stylized, which was wonderful. It was so of its moment. It was very stylized, and I think that we really got this sort of idea of watching it on stage. It was very stagey, but in a good way, in an intentional way. The remake is not. This is a movie with a capital M. And whereas in the original, if memory serves, there are an awful lot of long shots to sort of capture all of that amazing Jerome Robbins choreography, in the remake, it is immersive. You feel like you are in the center of this swirling electric energy and action. I mean, when the Jets sing When I'm a Jet, when you're a jet, and they're walking down the streets, these sort of angry, strutting young guys, you almost feel as if you have to sort of step onto the sidewalk to get out of their way. It's so exciting. The performances are brilliant. All of the leads are fantastic. Absolutely great. And another thing that I personally found different to the original is that in the original, although the actors in the 1961 version and the actors in the 2021 version are all roughly the same age, for me, The characters in the 61 version read as a little bit older. Now, maybe that's just my perception, because I first saw West Side Story when I was like 8 years old, so everybody seemed like a grown-up to me then. And I'm watching the revival as a 56-year-old woman, so everybody seems young to me. But the cast did read, for me, as much younger than in the original, and this really worked. Because we're talking about kids in West Side Story. This is a story of youth. And also because I have a 15-year-old stepson, it resonated with me, you know, in a much more poignant way than the original, in terms of the experience of being a teenager, a teenage guy out to prove himself. Another reason why I think this version is different in a positive way is that the supporting cast in the Spielberg version are given more heft. They're more three-dimensional. They're given more character. They're given more lines, I think. And some fabulous performances come out of the supporting cast. All of the cast are great. The young leads are tremendous. They're perfect. But for me, the breakout performance, my favourite performance in West Side Story was Mike Feist, who plays Riff, the leader of the Jets. He was phenomenal. He reminded me of a very young Sinatra. He reminded me a little bit of James Dean. He reminded me a lot of George, my stepson. He was just a fabulous character. But all of the performances were great. You know, you start off meeting these two sets of youth, the Jets and the Sharks. And when you first meet them, they are these overly confident, strutting, angry young men who very quickly turn into very frightened young men. And I found it really poignant. I really did. Other differences that I liked in the remake, I loved that they gave the song Somewhere to Rita Moreno to sing. You know, there's a place for us, somewhere a place for us. At that point in the show, I always felt that we didn't need another Tony and or Maria love ballad. That's just me. And so I love that it was given to Rita Moreno, who performs it, an elderly lady sitting in an empty drugstore in a neighborhood that's being pulled down around her as the people she knows and loves are being torn apart. And suddenly, that song, Somewhere, doesn't read as a song about star-crossed lovers anymore. It's a song about the immigrant experience. And I found that very, very moving and a really, you know, wonderful way to reposition that song, especially for today. The standout number, as I am sure you've heard, all the numbers are great, but the standout number is definitely America, which is always the standout number in West Side Story anyway, whether on Broadway or in the original movie. But in the Spielberg version, I'm actually getting chills thinking about it again. It was one of the most exciting moments I've ever experienced. In the cinema, I haven't seen a musical number like that since the golden era of the MGM musical 50, 60 years ago. It was spectacular. In fact, all of West Side Story was spectacular. The only criticism I would have is the same that I have for the original and the Broadway show. I do think the last 30 minutes or so has a pacing problem, a little bit drawn out, but that's just me, and I apply the same note to all the versions. Let me turn to the costumes. Now, when I heard that Spielberg would be remaking West Side Story, I got very worried about the costumes. That's how empty and sad my life is. I actually worry about upcoming costumes in movies. But then I learned that Paul Tazwell would be doing the costumes, and I breathed an audible sigh of relief, but I had no idea of the brilliance, truly the brilliance, that he was capable of. These costumes are superb. I was so in love with Irene Sharaff's original vision for the costumes in the 1961 version, using palette as a way to distinguish between the jets and the sharks. And Tazwell has done the same. The jets are all dressed in shades of blue and grey and teal and pumice, these very sort of cold hues, whereas the sharks are dressed in crimson and mustard and yellow, these very hot and fiery colours. And so when you see these two groups clashing, it is explosive. It's so exciting. But moreover, Tazwell also plays with tailoring and silhouette with his costumes. The jets are very slouchy, layered, scruffy. They really have this wonderfully distressed, very dirty looking vibe, whereas the sharks are much more tailored. They dress in an aspirational way. And so again, when you see these two factions coming together, the silhouette is different, and throughout the attention to detail in these costumes. How did Paul and his team do it with such a huge cast? The scene where there is the high school dance, you'll remember that from the original, and you'll know the scene I'm talking about if you've seen the remake. There must be, 100, 200 cast members in that auditorium, and the attention to detail on every single person's wardrobe is astonishing. So if there is not an Oscar nomination in Paul Tazwell's near future, I will be very cross. Anyway, in conclusion, West Side Story is imbued with the kind of electricity that I haven't seen in the cinema in a very long time. It does make for a great family movie for maybe ages 12 and up. What came as an amazing surprise to us is how much George enjoyed the movie and engaged in it. He could relate to those kids. And because of George, I could relate to them far more than if I didn't have a 15-year-old stepson to live with. I give West Side Story, honestly, a 10 out of 10. Is it perfect? Well, pretty near to perfect in my opinion, and visually sumptuous. I never think of Steven Spielberg, or I've never thought of Steven Spielberg as being a particularly visual filmmaker. I think he's a fabulous narrative filmmaker, but I never really thought he was as visually compelling as somebody like Martin Scorsese, say. I have changed my mind. This is one of the most visually sumptuous movies that I've seen in a very long time. A great one for the family, a great one for all of you. Anyone who's interested in fashion history will love it. And as Annabelle said this morning, when it's available to stream, can we just buy West Side Story so we can watch America 100 times in a row? Yes, we can. Anyway, that's my capsule review of West Side Story and my little costume analysis. And I'll be back very soon with more on the ultimate fashion history. Bye for now.